Hey there, it's Ryan Reynolds, and you are listening to Fearless in Devotion, the absolute worst podcast in all of football history. Go get them, guys.
Here they come, a mighty champions, raise your voices.
Chris O'Neill, welcome back to a special Fearless in Devotion. Someone has stood up and shown a very proud shirt there.
I hope he's not having a wee.
Yes, many of you will remember from last season our chat with Welcome to Wrexham showrunner and exec producer Jeff Luini. It was a tour de force. He gave us loads of little tidbits from behind the scenes of a show that we think keeps getting better and better. So with this in mind, we've invited him back, which is great news for me and Tim, because this fella literally interviews himself and gives us more little sort of nuggets than we could ever prize out of him. But not just that, we've also got another of the exec producers, Andy Thomas. Now, Andy is from South Wales, but we cannot hold that against him. So welcome, Jeff and Andy. Thank you very much for joining us.
So thanks very much. Thanks for having us. Also, please don't hold it against me the fact that I don't have a Welsh accent, because I split my time between Wales and England. So
he got called out. He got called out in a Q&A the other day by some Wrexham lads for having a fake Welsh accent.
I mean, that's rich. We're a border town. There's so many times people come up to me and say, you don't have a very strong Welsh accent. So I share your pain, Andy. Andy, let's come to you first. Now, we know a lot about Jeff from last time. You know, he's a major part of Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and obviously has known Rob for a number of years. But how did you get involved?
So I've worked in unscripted for 20 years. So I haven't done anything in the world of scripted comedy or anything like that, like Jeff's done, but started working in London and then moved over to the States almost 20 years ago. So I was working in LA and worked with a couple of people that work at a company called Boardwalk, and Boardwalk Pictures are one of the production companies that are involved in Welcome to Wrexham. And one of the guys that was working on the first couple of seasons sold his own show and then left Wrexham to go and do that, which is very exciting. And then there was a spot open for me to be able to kind of slide on in there. So that was about it, really. Not as exciting, unfortunately.
It was exciting. I'll say it was exciting for me because here we have, we need to fill a chair, and Andy comes in obviously as a Welshman. So to me, for someone who's stateside and looking for some sort of authenticity and someone who can see things through a different lens, and even whether his accent was fake or not, I didn't know at the time. And so Andy sort of brought that in. I mean, to me, just a little bit of legitimacy, a little familiarity, even with like geography, so we don't make those errors that sometimes we make. And then, and his experience and just sort of his passion, like it was a slam dunk from the beginning. I don't even know if we talked to anybody else after I talked to Andy.
Do you know what? It was a question I had coming later on, because this season especially, a lot of the mistakes have been ironed out. Now, I mean, when I say mistakes, there's little things that a very eagle-eyed football fan would pick up on. And what I mean is, we're not going to talk about the map again. I mean, the map's done and dusted. But just little things like if they were traveling, they might be on the wrong motorway. Something like a real geek like me would pick up. But I'm sure the likes of Andy has managed to sort of iron right out there to be much more of a pitch perfect season. I mean, we'll get onto this. Me and Tim, I think, both are in agreement that we think this is the best season so far. I was going to say by far, but I think that's doing down what we've done before. But I just think it was a great, fantastic eight episodes. Before we sort of get into that, Jeff, what's a showrunner? Because give us an idea. I mean, I can imagine it. I imagine it's a lot of running. Is it quite flamboyant?
I trained Humphrey most of the time. A lot of training. The show running. I mean, and there are sort of, we're a three-headed monster. There's Josh Driscoll and there's Brian Rowland also, and so there's running of the show, the day-to-day, sort of the creative. And then there's all these other components that have to do with budget, communicating with network, with studio, communicating with production company, communicating with the people in UK, our production crew in the UK. So it's a lot of, respectfully BS that needs to be ironed out. Obviously dealing with Rob, Ryan, George, and just making sure sort of I's are dotted and T's are crossed, and it just sort of like shit sort of lands with you, right? And
Right.
you sort of have to take, like, why is that music cue in there that could cost, how many zeros on the end, and justifying that, and and dealing with all these different departments. You speak about music, the composers, there's just so much that's going on, and so you don't know until you know. It's one of those things until you experience it, and you get an email, you go, oh, I guess that's something I have to deal with today, right?
Right. Cool.
Is that
It's
fair,
yeah,
Andy?
it's the kind of captain of the ship, I guess. And we have three captains, and they all work very well together, which is kind of cool. I've worked on other shows where you've had multiple showrunners, and it's not always been quite as cohesive as the three that we are lucky to have on Welcome to Wrexham. But yeah, definitely the captain of the ship, and dealing with all the different departments, whether it's production, post-production, music, legal, all that kind of good stuff, and just sort of like having a one voice at the top in order to be able to sort of steer that ship so that there's not a million voices trying to take it in a million different directions.
What I would say is, once you sort of moved up the production, so obviously the first season came out a lot after the season it was featuring, and then it got a bit closer to the second season. It got really close to the third season. I think you gave yourself a couple of extra weeks this time, and I think that really, for me, that really sort of helped really polish it. I think each of the episodes had a very clear premise, and I think that's more sort of, it came across more this season than anything else, which I really enjoyed. So how do you sort of sort that? Do you have like an idea that episode 5 we're going to go in this sort of direction, and do you have like a, I don't know, like a bin of footage where you sort of go, right, I remember that could work well with this idea that we've got for this episode, and is that how you sort of approach, how would you sort of pull these together?
Sure. It's one of those things where we're lucky from an unscripted perspective, where we've got a kind of through line for our narrative in terms of what the football teams are doing, whether it's the men's, the women's, or the academy, in terms of being able to give us something to have as a kind of central direction to go with. And then, like you say, we've got lots of scenes with people from the town or elsewhere where we've got things that may or may not sort of fit in with how the team are doing, whether they're doing well, badly, injuries, not injuries, whatever it might be that's going on. And then we have a giant whiteboard with just shit tons of index cards all over it, where we're basically every day just moving stuff around. Something might be in episode 3 one week, and it might end up being in episode 6 a couple of weeks later when you're that far into the season and things are changing around. So it's one of those things where I don't know what your guys are like when in your day jobs in terms of work at the moment, but post-COVID, a lot of television has stayed quite remote, and this show, we go into the office quite regularly because we all want to be in a room to just move those index cards around together and sort of sit in front of it and do Tim's favorite pondering in front of it and just kind of hang out and check it out and figure out where we want things to go. And slowly but surely, those themes kind of come together as that process evolves, as you get more scenes, or you have a new character that's popped, and you want to try and see if you can fashion them into an episode and see if you can try and make it work as cohesively as possible. And it's a team effort from that perspective. We have a fantastic team of producers and editors on the show that we have daily calls with as well, or certainly multiple times a week, in order to be, as they start putting an episode or two together in terms of, okay, we want to try and take it down this route, they start putting it together, and it's like, actually, this is working, this is not working, and then you kind of go back to the index cards and fuck around with them again, kind of thing,
And I'll say, as an example, like Andy's saying, like, there's things that happen. We try and tie everything together thematically, so you can make all these connections between, it's the team, it's the town, it's the owners. So how do we have that connective thread? And when it works, it really works well. One of the things, an example is, like, all of a sudden, what was that, episode 4, I think? Was it 4? When Fletch and Chomp are all of a sudden playing key roles in the results on the field, on the pitch. And so all of a sudden we're going, okay, there's something here about the seniority. How can we lean into sort of longevity? How do these guys stay relevant in the sport? And then sort of we have an episode on the pitch, and then how can we tie that into other things happening in the community and with the owners, Rob and Ryan, and, and I think Channing Tatum was in there, and like, how does a 38-year-old guy bend his body like that? So, sometimes we're sort of blessed, but it is, like Andy said, we've got just so many cards that are just like seeds of ideas, and it starts to sort of come together, and we kind of, what's happening on the pitch. We had I'll let you guys go ahead.
Well,
Well, I
I'll
mean, I
talk
was going to add that
football.
we have a plethora of material as well now with years into this, right? So we've got people that they may have shot some stuff with back in season 2 that we may want to revisit and sort of see whether that can work going forward as well, which has been kind of cool.
Yeah, we have getting a season 5 pickup we already know, like episode 501, it's rich already.
if this was committed to DVD or Blu-ray or whatever that is now, there would be a added extras feature. Remember, I used to get the thing, and it'd be like, deleted scenes, blah blah blah. So take me to Mr. Phil Parkinson. I am a huge fan of the Parky stuff, whether it's dressing room, whether it's the touchline and that spat he had with the Stockport female fan, which was brilliant. I want more. I want more. I'm thirsty for more Parky. Parky Cam, stick a GoPro on his chest, whatever. Is there anything of his footage that was absolutely, there's no way we can put that in? And a sort of second part to that, is there anything that he specifically came to you after and went, please do not use that, it's going to make me look really bad?
I don't think so. We may drop a C word here or there just for the Disney people, but most of the time I think it's pretty
That's
authentic.
Chester, yeah, Jeff.
Yes, absolutely. Right, Andy? I mean, I think, Phil he's so authentically himself using that word, where you meet him and he just loves football. He just breathes and bleeds it. So, and he's these sort of two different personalities, which we see him, in the media and when you're sitting with him in person, where he's a very thoughtful man, and then you put him in the locker room and on the sideline, and that's what's so great. And go ahead.
I would say there's a couple of sensitive things that we've had to be careful of in terms of like things where there's been scenes where he's been talking about potential transfers that we don't want to necessarily put in the show, where he's having an authentic conversation, because the idea of the show is to be as fly on the wall as possible. So occasionally you're going to pick things up that may or may not go somewhere when it comes to that kind of thing. So we just have to be cognizant of that and make sure that we're not fucking himself over by saying he's going to try and get this X player in and then he doesn't actually do it, kind of thing. So that kind of thing we have to be cognizant of, for sure.
But that eventually comes out in the wash too. Like we're protected sort of for time wise for.
Even what you've just said then, that really confirms to everybody that Phil trusts the documentary crew implicitly. When you compare that to the very beginning, when no doubt there was a little bit of skepticism on his part, because he'd obviously been burnt before, previous clubs in that sort of situation. So that kind of tells you that the trust is there. It's been there for a long period of time now, that doc crew feel part of that extended family. So that must be, was that part of the initial battle, was winning over that trust to say, look, we're not here to make you look foolish. We're here to, this is fly on the wall. There will be some stuff that needs to be in there. There's going to be some stuff that maybe doesn't need to be in there, but ultimately you had to earn that trust. And I imagine it was done quite early on, obviously helped by the fact winning on the pitch, no doubt.
Very much so. In season 1, that was just everyone getting familiar with each other. I'm not sure how fond he was of Phil's enthusiasm, and I just think it went over really well, and I know Rob loves it. And so if there's any sort of issues there, I'm sure they've discussed that, but we've been able to move ahead full speed with that. But yeah, it really is trust. And we also understand, like, we're not here to do an expose on the club. As the club goes, so goes the doc so far, knock on wood. Like, they performed well. We've been fortunate to follow them along the way. But we all know going into championship that if we're 10 matches in and we're in the relegation zone, everyone's going to be calling for Phil's head, right? Like that's just the nature of football, right? So fortunately, we have a little perspective. We don't have to go there immediately. So, in Phil, we trust.
Yeah.
I think that's also... Oh, sorry.
Go on, Andy. Go on, sorry.
Sorry, I think that's also one thing about just sort of content in general, in terms of trust, right? Trust is implicit with it, whether you're talking about It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia between the director and the cast, or unscripted in terms of a documentary series, or even just things like Big Brother or or like having trust between the producers and the cast, or what have you, or the directors and the cast, it always makes for whether it's going to land as an authentic, good show, or whether it feels like a little bit off and you can't quite put your finger on it. It's normally down to that kind of trust behind the camera and in front of the camera.
Yeah. In terms of, like, obviously Andy's already alluded to it, and I concur wholeheartedly. We all think that this is undoubtedly, the best of the season so far in terms of what it brings, in terms of the amount of emotions it elicits from everybody. So on that basis, I'd imagine there's more awards coming everybody's way. I suppose the only sort of not a criticism, I suppose the only drawback this time was they were a lot shorter in duration compared to previous ones from the top of my head. But with that, you're packing an awful lot in. So I think what was it almost leaves you thirsty for more at the end of each episode. Was that something you were aware of? Was it a case of, right, we need to kind of really squash this in a bit more, we need to be a bit more economical with what we're putting in rather than dragging things out? Or was it a case of, let's just make it a little bit more bite-sized because we can now, because we've established the club in the hearts and minds of so many newer fans?
I think, like, if Andy and I had our way, and our fellow producers, we probably would come in longer, because we do have to, as we say, kill a lot of babies. I think this is definitely a byproduct of Rob. Now, Rob has a certain number that he wants to hit in his mind. And so we'll come in and we'll get the cut to that number, that runtime, before we send it to him. And my experience going back to Sunny and scripted is, what the people don't see, they're not going to miss. And so Rob has such a keen eye for editorial. And I think what you're seeing is a byproduct of his process, which is leave him wanting more. And really, and here's another funny thing about Rob, like talking about the DVD extras and deleted scenes, and going off to the Sunny world for a second. There's been for years the network studio calling for, like, hey, let's release all this old content that never made it in the show. And his philosophy is, if it didn't make it in the show, why would we put it out there?
Yeah.
And so I think he's really good at refining things down to the best of the best, no matter how much it hurts us and our editorial and producerial team who work so hard. And there are times, and we've talked about this before, where there have been things that we've been told to lift or cut from the show. And because, going back to needing the trust of all the people involved and these people who open their lives to us, where we have advocated on 2 to 3 times and really had to fight to keep something in, and to everyone's credit, we were able to keep it in, and in hindsight, it was the right choice. So I think, Tim, what you're seeing is just that effort of just refining it down, and the whole thing with Cole and a diamond. That's my take on it. I don't know, Andy, how you feel.
I don't really have much more to add than that. It's definitely something that I feel being in an edit suite with Rob is quite cool, actually. Like, just seeing how he thinks about things in a different way. Like I said, I've never done scripted, so coming into an edit suite with him and sort of seeing how that mindset's slightly different has been quite. It's been a great learning curve for me the last couple of seasons. It's been quite good.
Do you know what? That actually leads me to my next question. So we were going to go into the episodes, but before we sort of really got into the bones of them, one thing I did want to know is, how involved are Rob and Ryan in the premises, in the editing, and in the final decision making? Now, it sounds to me that maybe Rob is a little bit more forward on that. Is that because of his experience in TV, or is there quite a 50-50 sort of mix there?
I think if Ryan was in LA and wasn't New York based, I think he would be in the edit suite with Rob. But his right hand man, George Dewey, who founded Maximum Effort with him, is at LA based. So Rob and George are quite often in the edit suite, and definitely will be. I don't think they were in the suite for every single lock, but they were certainly in there for a couple of the episodes this past season.
Yeah, and I would also say they're all very aware. And that the other thing that goes back to trust, and before we jump into the episodes, I think one of the benefits that people are seeing, if you feel that this season was better than others, or at least had some great episodes in it. It has to do with the continuity of everyone working together. It's just like any team, any situation where there's that trust and there's an understanding of how people work. There's just a clear grasp of everything from start to finish, and you're just going to become more efficient at that point. And back to the Rob and Ryan, they're both very aware of what's going on, and I think there's also a lot of trust bringing in Andy. You know, he's been here for a couple of years now, and they see how we treat this and how much we care about this and how we want to set this on a table for them, so when they see a cut, they don't have anything to say. Like, that's the most complimentary thing we can experience, is when, you know, our favorite thing is going to the network and the network says, we have one note out of 42 minutes and 30 seconds. That says a lot for what the people do on the show.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look.
Their note is normally, this is terrible, start again.
Get out those barely legible North Walian voices.
He does some temp for us. Has he done temp for you guys? I don't know.
One thing I do want to ask about the first episode. I mean, we won't delve into absolutely every cough and spit of it, but it was the Rosie Hughes issue, which I bet she was quite nervous that was going to be explored. It caused a little bit of a controversy over here, but I think it's the sort of thing that's a bit of a storm in the teacup. Was that the sort of thing that you would never really think to shy away from? A, because she can have her say on it, and B, because it just sheds a bit more light around it all?
For me personally, it was something that was a little bit of a storm in the teacup. I totally agree with you, but it was something that sort of illustrated for me personally that the women's team are semi-pro. They're a team that are not experienced when it comes to being in front of the media and in front of these kind of moments on a regular basis. And so it's a learning curve that the club, the women's team, the younger players coming up to the academy are going to be having to learn about. And I think it's just an example of just something that you could say, a tiny little thing that doesn't feel very consequential to you, but could actually mean something if you don't think about it on the larger picture. And I think that's just something that you grasp and you learn the longer that you play at that kind of level. And one day, hopefully, the women's team will be fully professional and they'll be able to kind of go down that route, and that will be a big part of the learning curve for them going forward. So to me, it was that was an interesting thing to explore from that perspective, really, to understand that a little bit.
Yeah, we're constantly looking to juxtapose what the women are going through and the men, and that's a perfect example of that. And again, we're not out to expose Rosie, but also this is something that happened, and she owned it, and she had apologized for it. And we give her a chance to have a voice about it, and let's all learn from it. Let's not throw everyone under the bus. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me.
In terms of, you obviously touched on the women's game and how that was a theme throughout the entire season. Also, in episode 2, High Hopes, there was a fair bit of emphasis around a certain game with a certain team from a certain city who play in blue and have a certain well-known American footballer involved. So that entire game with Birmingham, I mean, there's a fair bit of emphasis placed upon that. Was that always naturally going to happen because of Rob and Tom Brady and the whole supposed Hollywood derby, which seemed to have cultivated out of nowhere, and obviously all the networks have gone onto it and everything else. So there was quite a fair bit on that. We don't need to talk about the result, but tell me a bit about that. Was that quite an enjoyable segment to get your teeth stuck into? It was kind of nice not being the big fish for a change.
I think I'll jump in here real quick. Going back to episode 1, one of the things, if you guys notice, the summer tour that we were covering in season 4 was way more competitive than season 3. The club did really well, and we didn't show a lot of match footage, a little bit of that, but we highlighted the success of the summer tour going up against some premiership teams, and then we chose to end episode 1 before a match had even started. So we knew going into season 2, this goes into the Blues, is that we had a different start in League One, than we did into League Two. And so here we're coming out of the gate and it looks like things are kind of rosy, but we know the reality is we're up against some big competition. So we knew that was sort of the bulletin board. We knew that match against Birmingham City was going to be something that we'd cover, and it sort of went the way we thought it was going to go. So yeah, we knew that was definitely going to be a point of where do we fit into the pecking order. You know, I think a lot of people early on identified Birmingham as they were going to get automatic promotion. It just sort of looked like that, and being able to set up the financials behind that with, you know, the signing of their striker.
Yeah,
I think it also speaks to a little bit of that drama side of it. You know, it's a documentary series, but it's also a TV show, and so you need a kind of villain. And there was no better villain in that league at that time other than Birmingham City with their oodles of cash and their bald-headed owner. Do you know what I mean? So I kind of wish he was sat there with a cat, if I'm honest with you, because it would be kind of great.
Some real Dr. Evil vibes there.
Yeah.
I want to take you into episode 3, Disney FC, which is actually one of my favorite ones of the season. I just thought it was a good concept. Well done with Ryan and Rob sort of narrating it. How hard is it to get those two in a room? Because obviously the schedules are always clashing. Is that the main sort of logistical nightmare that you have?
100%.
Yes.
Yes.
100%.
That was. I got to make sure what NDAs I've signed. We had to shoot that at the last minute. Like we had temped a lot of that into the cut, knowing when are we going to get the two of them together. And the reason we got the two of them together, we shot that at Conan O'Brien's podcast studio because Ryan was going to be there, I think, interviewing Conan for his John Candy documentary, if that makes sense. So
I'm following this, right?
Yeah. So we quickly spring into action and know this is a moment. And so, and we had, you saw them for a second there. We can get back into the episode, but at the very end, I think we had them dressed up as Walt Disney back in sort of the 60s.
Yeah.
And we had a lot of costume changes and wardrobe and hair and makeup and mustaches. And we just didn't have time to do this whole other bit. So it ended up being about 15 seconds.
Now, there was a lot of good stuff in that. One bit I sort of enjoyed, and I enjoy this all the way through, and I think Tim's the same. It's like when you're going down and you sit with a player and you really get to know them. So one of them this is where we really got introduced to Jack Marriott. Now, I think maybe this is why it's such a relatable show for US and North American fans. Is US sports stars seem to me, they seem pretty untouchable. They seem to be pretty rich, well off. They've got all the trappings of fame. But Jack is just like you and I. It's sort of, you know, he has the same sort of hopes and fears that we do. You can sort of see his insecurities. And I think, you know, he knows that he's got a certain time to maximize all this for his family and for the rest of his life. Do you think that sort of personal side is what really resonates for a lot of worldwide fans?
I think anytime that you have an opportunity to pull back the curtain and sort of see behind the facade, I mean, any sports team, anybody with any kind of I want to say a better word than celebrity, but you know what I mean? Like anybody that's got some infamy, if you're ever able to pull back the curtain and sort of see a little bit of relatability in any shape or form, I think that's great. Like there's certainly been some instances where that's been the case in US sports documentaries where they've had access in order to be able to get that and be able to pull that curtain back, right? So it's just about that. And I think that's a testament to the fact that the UK team have just, like we started talking about earlier on, just that trust that they've managed to get with the players and the club, have been able to get that kind of access, to be able to get that trust, to be able to get that kind of honesty on camera so that you do have that relatability. I do agree with you. I feel like American sports stars can quite often have this kind of up on a pedestal kind of thing, but it's even with that existing, it's still a case of the fact that they are just like me and you. It's just the fact that we might not necessarily have as much access to them in order to be able to kind of get that relatability.
Yeah,
I think that's what the show allows, the platform that we provide, and goes back to sort of the history of the show, is that it's okay to show some vulnerability. And that's what does set this apart, because they know we're coming in. In that case, you're setting up cameras, you're setting up lights. So it's sort of a construct there. But that's what makes these guys so great. And I think I have to go back to Phil and the players that he brings in, and he knows what the locker room's going to be like. And it's these type of people. I'm not saying they're all going to express their vulnerability in front of a camera, but what I think there is there's this trust, in the doc, but also within the team, within the locker room, where everyone's rowing in the same direction, and it's these people who are real people. And that's one of the things Andy and we talk about all the time is, as the club succeeds and moves up the ladder, and there will be new players coming in who have different experiences, who may have not had as many struggles as someone like Jack and overcome them, who have really been on a pedestal their whole career, from youth football, from academies all the way through, and have the media training. What is the motivation to sit down and talk about your vulnerabilities? And so that's something that we're going to be faced with as new players come in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be interesting trying to see what that looks like when you've got players that are potentially used to playing in the Premier League, and they're like, everything that they do on camera is very, very constructed in a very carefully planned way to be able to present themselves in the best light possible. When they come and hang out with Wrexham and suddenly they've got our crew hanging out with them, are they going to be shying away from it? Are they going to be open and honest about it? Like, what's fascinating? And that might also be something that we kind of try and tell that story. Do you know what I mean? But it just depends on what kind of content we get from that.
Yeah, I don't know how vulnerable you can be with a 100,000-pound watch on your wrist in an interview.
I can never answer that question. Unless I steal one. I think this goes back to, we were talking about people opening up and you getting a sort of an idea of them. I think this helped Phil Parkinson back in season 1, where he was under a little bit of pressure, but I think the first season really helped him sort of, you got to see the measure of the man a little bit. And you also got to see Rob Layton drywall his own front room. I mean, this is not the sort of stuff that you get in many sort of sports documentaries from the the so-called big stars. Now, just before I hand back to Tim, I just want to talk about that. There's a lot of rich things within the within. It seems very packed this season. What I mean by that, like little in jokes here and there, the Birmingham getting promoted all the way through. I love the way that you really use tweets, and some of them really added to the story you're trying to tell. There was just two little things I sort of picked up in this one. It's just two little funny throwaway ones. One was like, do you remember there was a bit where Stockport fans were giving a shit, and there was a load of them, and then one guy in the middle of his face was just blurred out. Can I just my own personal why was that guy's face blurred out? He just doesn't look like that, does he?
No, I think it probably has to do with not having a release, and maybe the way he was presented. Sometimes the legal team will come in and err on the side of caution, I would say, and then sometimes it plays into comedy also.
Yeah,
so we go like, okay, let's do that.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember specifically, Andy.
I'm trying to remember. It'll definitely one of those two things for sure. I can't remember that one specifically though.
Talking about and it's funny. I think the doctor shaking Arthur's broken hand at the start of the consultation.
So good,
was absolutely brilliant. And then he says at the end, "Better shake the other one." It's too late, mate. You've
already done it.
Specific to, I think we did this last season. I think we talked about this, guys. But I will give Disney credit because, especially in the Disney episode where we leaned into it so much, was that any sort of derogatory about Disney or Disney Plus, I push hard for, like, keep it. And eventually the company understood the comedy behind it and let us keep it in. So I'll give them credit there. We did not get censored on that.
No, it's funny, actually. I liken it to the Barbie movie because I'm sure we're all massive fans of that movie, right? Because of the fact that they just took the piss out of themselves the whole way through. And Mattel toys being the evil part side of it, right? It's kind of one of those things where I think you've got to own some of that sometimes. Otherwise, it just kind of diminishes the fun, and makes you feel like it's a bigger thing than it actually is. If you own it and kind of like throw it back in some people's faces sometimes, then it makes it a bit of fun.
Jeff, I think you mentioned maybe a couple of minutes ago about how do you motivate somebody to kind of sit down and talk about the vulnerabilities. Episode 4, built to last. One person who didn't, I can't imagine, needed any motivation to speak about his vulnerabilities was Gareth Owen. Obviously, former player, had a horrible stroke, essentially, which changed his entire dialect, really, and I often thought about this, and I remember at the time, with something like that, it would be so easy for that person to shun themselves away. How are people going to understand what this is? It's such a rare thing that's happened in terms of having a French accent all of a sudden. How do you go about explaining that? I just love the fact that he's used this as a platform to explain it and bring awareness and attention to that. I mean, again, we took the overriding thing for me throughout this entire season was the amount of tissues I went through. I was crying my eyes out pretty much every episode. I think is ridiculous. This was one of the moments for me in terms of just how it's all laid bare. So I think what I'm getting at really is how powerful was that? When you see this and you see it committed to tape, and obviously you're trying to do your job, and we talked about the humor just a minute ago in this, but the real life impact of people's stories, particularly one who's got such a massive association to the club. When you see this for the first time, are you thinking, wow, this is spine tingling stuff, and the way it's delivered as well, so with such poignancy?
Yeah, I mean, when we heard that he was going to speak to us about this and open up that way, that's another one, Andy, right? I think this was something we knew it was going to fit somewhere into season 4. The question was where. And going back to so how do you make it fit thematically into the episode? And correct me if I'm wrong, Andy. I think we figured, okay, it could fit into this thing about longevity and how does it fit in this episode? And I think I remember asking, my assumption was that Wayne had been from the turf, had been watching, has seen Wrexham matches his whole life, so he would have some perspective on watching Gareth play. And would be a voice to be like, this is where he was, this is where he is today, and to just sort of be a lens of who this person was. And I think that's one way that helped it fit into the theme of the episode, right? Because we had it in other episodes, and we knew we were committed. This was another one of those things where sometimes if it didn't fit, if it was a square peg in a round hole, that may not have made it into the season unless we could find a way where there was connective tissue. And so when and I can hopefully speak for Andy, when we saw this footage and heard it, we said, this has to go in. We don't know how we're going to make it work. And I think it's another testament to what this show is, where we find these people, not characters, real people who are going through things, who we all know someone, or we will know someone who goes through what he went through and is going through. And that's the humanity of the show. So that's
when we saw that interview come in, it was a slam dunk in terms of the fact that we knew that was going to go in the show. Like Jeff said, it was kind of trying to figure out what episode. Like I was saying earlier on, that index card moved around a few times on the board, kind of thing. But I liken that one actually to season 3 with James Jones. The piece about James Jones sort of moved around a few different episodes as well, trying to figure out where that was going to land the best. But immediately when we saw that stuff with James come in, it was a slam dunk for that too. And that's a classic example of what we were talking about earlier on, trying to figure out where things land in an episode to try and make things feel as cohesive as possible. And massive fan of Gareth Jones and his wife Gemma. When we saw that, it was like, definitely. I mean, actually, when we found out that he was willing to talk to us, we kind of already knew, like, yeah, this is going to go in. Do you know what I mean? Because he's willing to talk about it.
Oh, Andy, we need to speak to this. So there was something that was represented that that Gareth was told by, I think by his doctor, that, because we
Yes.
need to correct this for the record, is that, was it 1 in 20 people was how it was presented in the show. Basically, his situation and his chances for survival to reach the age of maybe, I think, 80 was very, very slim, and he plans to beat that. And what we learned subsequently, and we're not sure what the true medical is because we're not a medical show. And we heard that some people who may have been survivors of strokes, victims of the same circumstance, were emotionally affected by the fact that, oh no, I'm in peril. This is a figure, a percentage that I didn't know about. And our understanding is maybe that number that Gareth's doctor told him was not accurate. So the point being is there is more hope for survival and quality of life than may have been presented in the show, if that's fair. And we should let people know that, because we couldn't go out and do sort of retraction because it's not something to retract. But just for the record, anyone out there who has family, friends, or personally is going through something like this, things could be better than presented, if that's fair.
Sorry,
Well,
just one thing on that. I mean, I think that's quite an interesting premise on something that lives on a streaming sort of show or a streaming sort of platform. Is there ever a chance that you could go in and re-edit some of the older episodes? Is that anything A, you could do, and B, you would do?
The answer is yes, 100%. We have in certain circumstances. It comes down to financials and who's going to bear the cost of that.
And if they're willing to go through the pain, because there's obviously lots of people that have to get involved then as well, and all that kind of stuff. So there's the financial side of it, the repercussions, and then the sort of the logistical repercussions of it as well. But it's definitely possible. I mean, 15 years ago, I made a show for a cable channel over here that the head of the network watched an episode go out before streaming was even a thing, and gave me notes on an episode. So I had to go back and re-edit it and re-deliver it for the repeats. So it's definitely a thing that's possible.
I did that on an episode of Sunny 10 years after the fact. Great story.
Oh, wow.
There you go. Selective editing. All good.
Yeah.
Before I chuck it back to Andy about episode 5, I know he desperately wants to know what did happen with Channing Tatum at Elliot Lee's 30th birthday party, because it was mentioned, it was alluded to, it was teased, but it was never said. We think it was in Chester. We don't know what happened. Give us a clue.
Oh, it's a good question. I don't actually know where it was. Do you know where it was, Jeff?
I don't know where it was. Chester doesn't seem too far off.
Mm-hmm.
Someone knows. It's out there. Someone knows, because honestly, the stuff that Channing was texting Ryan at the end of the episode, that was all 100% true, where he was texting Ryan and saying, I'm so sorry, this is going to be out there. I think there's some sleuths who probably know. We desperately were asking for CCTV footage of it. And then we were told that didn't exist, or there was some barrier there. We tried. And then my big push was like, well, if we can't use it, if it exists, is there audio? Could we at least play the audio and put up an exterior shot of a pub or wherever presumably it was? And we never got the audio. I'm guessing. Andy, do you want to guess? I think there was probably, I mean, clearly there was drinking involved. Probably dancing. Some form of nudity. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not saying I have no knowledge other than that. I'm just extrapolating.
Well, we'll just go with naked limbo dancing somewhere near Chester.
You're probably close.
Yeah, we'll go with that one.
It's what happened at Jeff's birthday party last year, so it's probably not.
It's just that was the trial run. That was the trial run for the main thing. Yeah.
Channing didn't show up, man.
Episode 5, for me, the most poignant part was obviously the way you treated Arthur Massey's passing. I mean, I think you did a really good job on it for someone who's been a big part of the show, and I think Rob told it really well. It was just a really, really great little bit of TV. Is that once you heard about his death, is that how you were you sort of planning in your mind? How can we do this, and how can we do it justice?
It was one of those things where I feel like it was important for us to highlight the fact that it had happened, because he was such a big part of the club. I don't know. Did you guys ever meet him?
So we know his family quite well.
Yeah.
I never met Arthur himself, but his daughters I know quite well, and obviously Lee Jones, who used
Yeah.
to play for us. So it's part of the Wrexham community is that if you go for long enough, you know everyone by either name, sight, or bumping into them a few times. So yeah, even though the wider sort of family we know quite well, I didn't ever meet Arthur. Tim, did you?
No, I remember speaking to I think it was his daughter, and I said I'd love to meet him. I think it was the first time he appeared in the documentary. I was like, I've been blown away by just his. I mean, as we all know, supporting Wrexham in the past has been a tough ask at times. You know, week in, week out, you go out of the love for it and not expecting much more than in response. So he's seen so many stuff, and I really wanted to meet him, and I got invited to say, well, come round and we'll sort something out. And obviously, didn't manage to make that happen in the end, which is like a bit of a regret, really. But still,
I think we knew of his passing because it was in the summer, actually. So if you look at where this was episode 5, is that right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, there's a card, not to boil a man down to a card, but we knew we had to cover this. I think we had it in literally episode 1 to begin with. And it was, again, where is this place where is his place where it's most impactful? I mean, he did so much for us, for the show, his story, and the way that he opened himself up and that the family opened themselves up to us. So I think we owed him the tribute. And it goes back to what this show is. We celebrate a lot of things, and we also acknowledge the human condition, and that is losing someone we love, and especially someone who's been around for so long. So
he is the benchmark for what you want as a diehard supporter of a football club. And anybody watching the documentary will know somebody at their club of a similar age, whether they're still with us or whether they've passed. They will know that person. They will have been celebrated in the local press, so that's always going to hit hard with those people. And it was beautifully done with the shadowing and been walking into the ground. It was just, yeah, amazing.
Oh yeah, our one of our editors, Matt, put that section together, and he did a great job. So
another example of like people who go off on the show and do something, and then they show it to us, and you kind of like, I've said, like chef's kiss, like,
Yeah.
wow.
I mean, one thing I do want to say is I think the editing is fantastic all the way through. The final episodes especially really show that, and so we'll come into that more. But as you've mentioned, the editing, I thought it was spot on all the way through. Just one last thing on this episode, match day dressing room footage. So Phil, as Tim said earlier, the Phil Parkinson stuff is brilliant, following around all day. I, as a fan, love the dressing room footage. But I understand you can't use too much of it. Is there? And that's not because the club would say no, but because you can't just have 15 minutes of a Parky team talk. By the way, if you ever could have 15 minutes of a Parky team talk, I would absolutely love that, because I just love the psychology of what a football manager says to a player to try and get them, over the line. Is there a limit to how much you can put in on each episode on that?
No, it just speaks to the story we're trying to tell, and whether we feel like it's engaging and that kind of good stuff. I mean, I remember watching is it All or Nothing with Arsenal, with the Arteta dressing room chats, when he's talking about light bulbs and connecting everybody together with electricity on the pitch and all that kind of stuff. It's fucking fascinating to see all that kind of stuff. So I totally get you. And so whenever it's something that's engaging or something that we feel like is going to, like we were saying earlier on, like reveal, like pull back the curtain a little bit, then definitely there's no limit to it, for sure. We constantly want to try and put more of it in, because like you say, it is really fascinating.
I think it's a logistical thing too, because the locker room is so small. We get one camera in there tucked in the corner. So we are, the camera person is trying to figure out where's the story. is it Phil? Who the players were trying to focus on? So if we had multiple cameras, at times we've asked like, hey, can we put a static camera in there that's in all the time and recording all the time? We haven't got access there, but yeah, that would be great. I also think though it speaks to, I'm a huge sports doc fan. I'll watch everything, that we also have to know our audience, where
Right.
you guys may love that, but my mom may get tired of Phil's enthusiasm.
No, you're right. And that absolutely does resonate, because I think the beauty of this is it's not an all or nothing.
Yeah.
It is a lot more universal than that. And maybe that's what I'm trying to say. Is there too much of this you can use? Because if you're not a sports fan, then this part is the bit you don't like. And I sort of get that. I get that. Tim,
I think again it comes back to that story, isn't it? Like with the story we're trying to tell in that scene or that match or that episode, and sort of whether it fits into that kind of the way that you want to put that episode together. Is what Phil's saying kind of on track with that or not?
The thing that, and we talked about this last season, we'll get there in season 5. I'm fascinated with Steve Parkin. I need more Steve Parkin all day long.
Yes.
there wasn't enough Steve Parkin. There wasn't enough
I-
Steve Parkin this season.
What about that then?
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't much weak as piss stuff this season, but anyway, moving on.
I'll buy 5 pints to the first person who gets a Steve Parkin tattoo with "What about that then" captioned underneath. Doing that.
I should be
I
seeing
mean, that would be a
him.
pretty solid tattoo, I have to say.
Wouldn't it just?
Yeah, even
just-
just having the text "What about that then" is pretty damn good.
Yeah.
I think
What about that then?
I'm gonna see him in New Zealand in 2 weekends, I think. So I think maybe I'll get a picture with him with that caption.
Do it.
Love
Do
that.
it.
Do it.
And if Steve Parkin was to buy me 5 pints, tell him I'll get it tattooed. That sounds fair. So there we are.
Jeff, you can relay that, right?
Yeah, but we have to go and drink them with Steve. That is
Yeah.
He'll
Precisely.
do that with you. Just get down to
100%.
the race course.
I
Get
would
down to
love
the
to have a
course.
drink with Steve Parkin. He came to a Gursel Reds meeting years and years ago, just after the takeover, and he's just great value. Great value.
Oh
just,
yeah.
Just proper. You just don't get people like him in the modern game. They're all a bit dull, media trained. He just doesn't care, does he? He just tells you how it is, how it should be, warts and all, the best way.
But also like super warm. He's got one of my favorite moments in the entire season, and I know he wasn't in it as much as season 3 maybe, but like when Archie walks in on his tour around the racecourse and he's in there talking about Charlton and the right wing back. It's like it like literally makes my chest swell every time I see that moment. It's super cool.
I like his swearing more than I like Parker's, I'll be honest, just because it's a little bit more, I don't know, not refined.
natural.
I just like
it's more.
Yeah,
natural.
I think it might be season 2 where we scored. He goes, "Get in, you bastard!"
I want to set Tim up for this one. So just there was a nice little bit between Parky and Michael Williamson. It's something that you alluded to earlier, Andy, about you talk about new signings and you might not want to put that in because that might not come off. But they were talking about Sam Smith. The Sam Smith signing came up, and at that time I was wondering, we've not really heard from Mullin or Palmer on this, and we're about to bring in quite a big new signing, and then all of a sudden, right, episode 6. Tim, take it away.
Well, before you set me up with this, I'm going to set you up because there's a bit in this you tried to set me up with, lads. But no, I want Andrew to explain to you which part he absolutely despised in episode 6, the Red Dragons. You thought you got away with it, but you're not. So go on, tell Jeff and Andy which part you hated.
I already know. I've listened to this podcast.
Look, that opening poem monologue, that's not me. That made me a little bit sick in my own mouth. But I've talked to a lot of people who really loved it. So I understand that, and I understand setting up the whole concept of battling against the odds. And what I will say about this is we talk a lot about Mullin, we talk a lot about Palmer, we talk a lot about Sean Harvey's different role, and we talk a lot about Humphrey Carr's different role. For me, that doesn't fit into what your poem or monologue was. There's 2 parts, there's 2 people in this one where it really does. One is Archie, and the second is the girl at the end in Lesotho Pookie, I think her name is, and that's where it fits in for me. But as an actual bit of prose, that's not what I enjoy. But hell, I'm not going to enjoy every part of it, and what I don't like the most will be what another person does like the most. So I get it. I get it.
When Mark plays that at his funeral in like 20, 30, 40 years time, and you're there paying your respects, you'll be like, oh,
if they play it at my funeral, I'm rising out that coffin.
Oh, dear me.
There's always going to be stuff where you're going to like and you're not going to like you say, right? And so I'd be intrigued to see whether the people that liked that monologue piece do or don't like the dressing room pieces that you love. Do you know what I mean? So in terms of whether that balance is there, you know, so it swings and roundabouts with that for sure. And I think that was one of those things where we wanted to try and see if we could tie those stories together. And sometimes it's more successful than others. And if it landed with some people and didn't land with you, then it's all good. It's a creative art, I guess, for want of a better term. And so sometimes you appreciate it, and sometimes it doesn't land with everybody. So
yeah, I'll take that criticism and and live with it. That was a tricky episode to take all these almost divergent stories and tie them together thematically, and that was the swing that we took.
Yeah,
6 months. And 6 months time, I'll be saying to Andy, have we had any emails from the doc crew about doing any voiceover? None.
Rob, Ryan, and Red are there. We love that monologue.
We got them.
Never have criticized.
That's funny.
No, that's fair. Funny. I mean, with the sweet comes the sour. No problem, guys. Appreciate your honesty.
Yeah, of course. And also, it did make me laugh on the podcast when you're like, I bet it might as well have been Michael Sheen. We did actually reach out to Michael Sheen to try and do that, and he said no.
Oh, how disappointing.
Not because he didn't want to do it. I think he was just busy doing other stuff. So it's all good. But
get Rhys Ifans instead. Rhys Ifans is a wonderful, wonderful narrator, and he's a Wrexham fan. And I can't say he's a better actor than Michael Sheen, but
that's a good note. That's a good note.
Rhys Ifans did a wonderful, wonderful monologue for the Welsh national football team for the Euros, I think, and that was unbelievable. I will send you a link of it. It's brilliant stuff.
Knowing that he's a fan, that helps a lot, please. Yeah,
it's amazing. It's amazing. So episode 6, obviously, we for not just for locals, I suppose, but there's the really juicy stuff now in terms of this whole thing of what's happened to Mullin and Palmer. Now, something that's just popped in my head now. I could be completely way off the mark here. This, for me, was the only time we really, really scratched the surface of what had been going on. There was nothing in the press about it. There was no questions asked about it. Was that something that was mentioned and instructed or agreed upon, or is that just coincidence that it was never asked about, and then all of a sudden the first time we really get into the nitty-gritty of this issue was in the documentary?
I don't know what Mull's and Ollie's position was on the day-to-day. I just know this was something that we were asking consistently of our UK team was, will Mull sit down and talk? Will Ollie will always sit down and talk, but will they speak? Do they want to speak to this? Because we're willing to provide them this platform. And I was thrilled. Because I know there are a lot of prognosticators who will say the doc's not going to touch this, just because of their reputation with the club and where they've gotten us, that, how do you tell this story? And it's such a clear example of what happens in football. And I think, again, it goes back to these individuals who Phil's identified and brought in, where they can communicate on camera how they're feeling. And a testament back to our team in the UK to get them to speak to this. So to me, I was thrilled to see this. To get this in, and it speaks to sort of the quality and the access that the show has. Because like I said, I don't think people thought they were going to see this. I thought everyone thought it would just be brushed under the rug, and maybe it would never come to see the light of day.
Yeah, as we saw him with the sports psychologist, didn't we? So some with Dan Donaghy to begin with, not using him as a kind of shield anyway, because he was quite open and honest in terms of how he was feeling. He mentioned about an element of distrust from Parky towards him. And then all of a sudden you're thinking, oh, that's quite a revelation. And then boom, he's doing a piece to camera on his own saying, you know, it would be a perfect way to sort of top this story by playing in the Championship Wrexham, but I personally don't think I would play in any part. That caused headlines and ripples, significant ripples through the Wrexham fan base. And we're like, wow,
and everyone had a different opinion on it, didn't they?
Well, yeah, I mean, I got pillared for saying, well, I think you're misconstruing his comments. So I'm just calling it how I saw it, but everybody sees it in a different way. But were you quite surprised at how candid he was in that interview?
Yes. When he said that line, I don't think I'm going to play any part of it in the Championship, it literally made my eyes well up immediately, because it was like, I didn't expect him to be that straight up about it, right? And be that kind of really vulnerable. I think for me, when I saw Sam Smith come in, this is just on a personal, as a fan level, not as a TV producer or what have you. When I saw Sam Smith came in, I was like, Mullin's never going to make it that team ever again. There is no way he's going to be over there ever again. You've got Jack Marriott on the bench, and he's coming back from injury, and arguably was brought in to sort of like be somebody to be there with Mullin. And it just felt like when Sam Smith came in, it was like game over. So to hear Paul say that on camera, essentially, and kind of being that upfront about the fact that he felt like he was reading between the lines there as well, that was pretty heavy shit, and I was not expecting to see that at all. And just to go back to your original question, like, there was no kind of cognizant decision about or like understanding of, or messaging about whether we were going to be the first ones to kind of have it in the dock. It just was a reflection of what's happening. There was no actual decision about, we're definitely not going to do any press because we're only going to put it in the dock. That's not, and it's nothing like that. It's like we always have been. It's much more of a kind of reflection of what's happening, as opposed to like pushing anything, any storylines or what have you. It's definitely something that we're reacting to, as opposed to proactively kind of doing things like that.
Yeah, it's another example of people who are not expected in our society to be vulnerable. Someone as accomplished as Paul and Ollie together as a team, and to really be put in that position where, you know, they're sort of disposable.
Yeah. Were you both surprised he left? No.
No.
I wasn't personally. I saw that Wigan needed a striker. I actually kind of thought that was the perfect spot for him to go. And I think Alone is bang on, because I love the idea of him going there and turning on the Jets and doing great, and then making Phil's decisions even more difficult than they already are. But he's still being able to be fairly close to home in terms of, I know that's really important to him from Albie's perspective. And so the fact that they needed some firepower, I think, was kind of like the perfect place for him to go and land, I think, because I think like any footballer, you want to play, right? So go and play.
And we were rooting for him to play in the final match. We thought, oh, maybe he'll get a sort of a swan song, but no.
You were on Jeff.
Yeah.
Now
I hope he scores all the goals for Wigan and we recall him.
One person who will be keeping tabs on him is a certain Archie White. Little Archie, now cancer-free, absolute Lionheart warrior. I mean, that really was some impactful stuff, not because of the battle he was facing at the time, but again, you strip it right back. And I said to Andy this at the time, I said if somebody, if I'd went to Outer Mongolia and they'd never heard of Wrexham before, and I said, oh, we've got this documentary, and they didn't really have an interest in football sport, I would show them probably this episode, say it doesn't have to be about sport. This is about the people who are part of something, who are part of a institution that they love. And the fact that it was like a mirror shining back on to Archie and his family, it was just incredibly compelling TV. And again, what I've just mentioned previously, somebody will know somebody somewhere who is going through this. Might not be as young as Archie, might be somebody a little bit older. They might know somebody who's going through it. So again, it's just showing that human condition that you mentioned, Jeff. I mean, how good was he? How good was Archie and his family in terms of the stuff he's got going on, but maybe I don't know, maybe it's a slight welcome distraction amongst that kind of repeat cycle of being in the same four walls and having all this tests and everything else.
Andy can speak to this too. We had been following Archie and his experiences. It's not a story. The whole season. And all of it was so, I mean, just deeply, like we were all so engaged. It's someone I had never met. And a criticism that I have heard from some people was that they felt like maybe this was exploitative. But I would argue that people who are going through this and to see the hope, to give someone a glimmer of hope, that does serve the public good. But there were so many times where we're taking what he was going through, and honestly, we'd have these calls that Andy talks about, and we'd be like, how is Archie doing? Because we didn't want it to be something where we wanted the family to be okay with it. And there were times where he was in a really bad circumstances, and we would put a pause on the story and say that, you know what, this isn't, we can't really tell this. We need to know how Archie is doing. And so I think it just kept getting pushed down and down and down. And the family was so open. And Archie, you see this kid and the spirit that he has, and you just wish that you could tap into a little bit of that in yourself and just remind yourself, what life has to offer, even when you're just getting your ass kicked. And so I don't mean to talk in circles, but it was just one of those things where, because up until, when did that come out? I feel like it was a week and a half ago that we heard he was cancer free. Like when the season was done, his story is not done. His experience is not done. So we're still crossing our fingers every day. So when we got that update, we're asking like, how is Archie doing? And you don't want to impose on the family, but it's just one of those things where, a kid with cancer is like, how much of the human condition can you step into? And going back to like the family opening their hearts to us and being able to see him experience joy. My favorite part, there's so many favorite parts. One of my favorite parts of episode 8, Jump Ahead, was to see Archie up in the Betty Buzz suite celebrating that goal and seeing how much joy and energy was in that kid when he was going through chemo. Anyhow, so that's my 2 cents. But Andy can tell you, like, this was a constant discussion with specifically the story producer, who she was covering that the whole time.
Yeah, delicate, obviously, as you can imagine. I think the only thing I'm ready to add to what Jeff is saying is just a massive thank you to the family, because they were willing to talk to us. It took us a long time to navigate and be sensitive to the needs of Sarah, and the fact that she sat down and did an interview with us. I'm still kind of bowled over that she even had the bandwidth to be able to do that with everything going on with her kid, so pretty special. So it was an honor to be sort of able to put a spotlight on that. And one of my old schoolmates, Mike's younger brother, had that. So like you were saying, Tim, it's kind of one of those things where you have this kind of thing where you can relate to things sometimes with you, and just kind of has a little bit more of an impact than you expect it to. So pretty special to be able to tell that.
Lads, you were playing heartstrings like a banjo when it comes to the last couple of episodes, because we go straight into the next one, which is all seen through the prism of the Wycombe match, which is obviously probably a season-defining match in terms of our promotion bid, but it paled into insignificance what happened off the pitch with Maurice Jones. No, Tim and I were there. First, a thank you, because I did an interview before the match, and I'd had a very, very heavy night with Tommy Couse, and I'm so thankful you didn't use any of that footage, because everyone in work would absolutely destroy me for being so absolutely hammered. I'm sure I didn't make any sense anyway, but just going sort of through that. Again, it's quite it's another emotive one where you've got the family on board, probably because you've got so much goodwill in the bank from how you've dealt with stuff like that before. But I think, is it something that you would have leaned so heavily into if there hadn't have been a positive outcome?
I would say yes, because that match was such a pivotal match. That match would have featured anyway. If that hadn't had a positive income with Morris, is that what you mean?
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, obviously the match he would have done it, but what happened with Morris was such a key part of the match, because both Tim and I sort of think that when they went off and came back on again, they were sort of renewed the team, and they pushed for that win due to that stoppage and due to what they knew had happened to a Wrexham fan. But it was a very integral part of the episode. But I was just wondering, sort of creatively, if that hadn't have been such a positive outcome, and we're able to speak with Morris at the end with his family, is that something that you would have maybe glossed over a little bit, or is it something that you still feel you have to tell?
It's a difficult one to answer, I think. I think that my gut instinct tells me that because it was a poignant moment in the match, we would have highlighted it in the match. But if we wouldn't have had access to the family, or if it hadn't had a positive income with Morris, then I think it would have been highlighted in the match and then kind of probably moved on a little bit, as opposed to necessarily landing, because the access to the family and getting to know them and like managing to like have that relatability, I think was what made it what it was. Jeff, I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, there was a connection. I remember Rob had to that family on the day. He was texting with the family on the day, and I can't remember the connection.
I think
That
she's
I think,
she's US based, isn't she? The daughter, is that
yeah,
maybe?
she's in New York, but there was something where Rob was actually texting with the family, and I can't remember the circumstances. So I think the connection there, we still would have been able to sort of tell the story if things had not ended so great through Rob's lens. And again, this is a community, a club, uh, where things a lot of the time work out. Archie, Morris, where like we couldn't make this stuff up.
Yeah.
What didn't work out on that match, though, was the fact that we got the scores round the wrong way in terms of the home and away teams. So sorry about that one.
Yeah.
Oh,
Fucking
I
annoying.
didn't even pick up on that.
Oh well.
Just one other thing on that. More great insight this time into the James McLean car crash and how he sort of dealt with it, and how hard as nails he is, and managed to train even after flipping his Audi a few times. Didn't use any of the Elliot Lee crash, which happened more or less the same time. I thought it might fit in quite well with that. Was there a particular reason why you didn't go for that?
Yeah. That was out of respect for the other person involved in that accident, and we weren't sure of her condition, and so
Yeah.
I think that was sort of the way where we wouldn't have all sides to the story, and yeah, we just don't know what her condition is right now. The other thing, going back to McLean, that was another thing where it had happened earlier in the season, but it fit in episode 7, because my recollection, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, I think he came in to the second Birmingham match and he almost scored the winner.
Yeah.
Right after, which would have been amazing to put in the other episode, but it played in here really well. And and people went through a lot of work to track down. Like, I thought it was very cool. We got the original phone call from him on the different footage. Like, that played really well into that scene work.
Yeah, shout out to James for allowing us to use that, because we had to get his permission in order to be able to use that phone call. And also shout out to the lorry driver who helped us out with their little camera in the front of their cab to be able to get that. Yeah, lots of tracking stuff down, but yeah, pretty crazy.
Some good detective work there. I think Tim will go through the final episode, but I'll pop in as well it certainly was a fine way to end the season. Tim?
Oh, where'd you begin? I mean, we all know it's ending, but we still don't know how it's going to be presented.
Well, we also know how it's going to end.
It's just like, I mean, I don't even know where to begin with this. It was just, there's so much in there, so much to cram in terms of the run-in, the sort of frustration of those successive draws. And then obviously we had Humphrey's marathon thing still on the go with the bloody nipples. I'm sure he was delighted that you kept his nipple chafing in, but a living proof that you can still triumph through adversity, even if it manifests itself in a different way. Like, unlike the cancer stuff, but he hates running. He hates it. But you can see why he hates it. So I think, I mean, there must have been a lot of laughter when you're seeing this footage come in and thinking, oh, at least he's put up, and then the guys are going to have to shell out for it. So that was particularly enjoyable.
Sorry, can I just ask one thing on that? Was that a decision early doors that you knew you wanted to follow that all the way through? As in, because I know we're sort of talking things that might fit into episode 5 or things that are, but this was a constant all the way through. It was almost like a little soap opera of seeing this guy suffer.
100%.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, go for it, Jeff.
I was just going to say, we started the season where one of the themes was going to be, marathon versus a sprint. That's how we saw, the team has been on this sprint, and we talk about it in episode 1. And Humphrey's on this marathon. The town is more of on a marathon, and so we knew. The great thing, Andy's heard this story a bunch, but when we first talked to Humphrey about him committing to run this marathon, he was sitting on a stoop, like smoking a cigarette, saying, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And the great thing is, I talked to him a couple of weeks ago and was asking like how he was doing. And he was like, oh, I just had the most delicious cigarette. He hates running. The whole thing, he's done. He did it. He checked a box. It's over. But that was something that we thought was going to be a great through line throughout the season, that we could track Humphrey's progress as we tracked the club's progress.
And obviously, Rob came for the Blackpool game in the away end, something that he's been desperate to do for a while. How good was that? I mean, he was a few rows down in front of me on the right hand side. We all had to be patient with the way the game was, and just the raw emotion of that. I think that kind of summed up the perfect feeling for everybody at that time, because it was bubbling and it's like, we're in this position again. I think, there's a few bits of me it's talking about, will we Wrexham it up, etc. Is that thing, can we sort of consign that to the history books now? But to have him there, and that pretty much I think it just summed up what it means to be a football fan of any ilk, of any team, up and down the country. Doesn't matter if you're fighting for survival, doesn't matter if you're trying to get promoted, or if you're mid-table and you're facing off against a close rival. That pretty much sums up the sort of whole gamut of emotions that you get from these little 90-minute dramas, basically, is what they are on a Saturday and a Tuesday. 90-minute dramas that just put you through the emotional ringer. So did Rob have a certain game he always went to in mind, or was it very much the fluidity and the dynamics of how the season was going to pan out? Can we get him at this one now?
Jeff would probably know better than I, but I feel like he wanted to try and get to the matches towards the end of the season, so he was there for if the promotion happened, right, and didn't want to miss out on the opportunity of being there. But also, like you say, he's been wanting to go to an away game for a while, so I know Jeff, you would probably know better than I.
It fits his schedule. There's a board up in his office. Andy saw it. We sort of know broadly like where he might be overseas, where he might be in Wrexham. So I think it just sort of fell around that time, and the logistics worked out. One of the things that I thought was really interesting, which we didn't address, but if we go back to earlier seasons, like Rob was the bad luck guy, right? Every time he went to a match, they'd lose. Ryan would go, they'd win. Rob would go, they'd lose. So I thought this was a great turnabout where he got to go and actually experience this, like you said, sort of pensive, first half, what's going to happen, and then just this explosion of emotions. And going back to the episode, we knew when we were coming to the end of the season that we were going to sort of do a countdown. There are 5 acts in every episode. And so we're like, okay, we feel like the last 5 matches, this is probably going to go down to the last match. So we're going to break up the final episode into 5 acts, and each act will be a match. It didn't work out that way, but we had been targeting how we were going to play this last episode. So it worked out great structurally. It gave us sort of a chance to do an epilogue after the second to last game, but we really had a lot. There's a lot of intention that went into producing this episode. And I don't know if it was you, Andy, that said earlier, the other blessing that helped us on our production side, post-production side, was securing promotion when we did and not going to the playoffs. Because if we went to the playoffs, we probably would have had to take a couple of weeks off in our airing. We wouldn't have enough time to sort of do the deep dive that we did on that last match. Anyhow, that's just some context.
If we'd made the playoffs, we all would have needed a couple of weeks off to emotionally prepare ourselves for it, to be honest, given previous encounters. Just come into the sort of main one for this, which obviously won universal acclaim, really, was Rob's speech, interdispersed with the home video footage, and tying that in with the Charlton game. It was just beautifully packaged and presented, and kind of maybe I don't watch enough sports documentaries, I'm sure you can tell me otherwise, Jeff, but that to me is kind of a real insight behind the curtain of professional football players. Is that, yes, we see them as these well-paid sportsmen, but ultimately they are what we were years ago. We all wanted to play for the club. We all would have loved to play for the club. And the fact that Rob, by virtue of some famous friends, is saying, just play like you're 10 years old. Just play just let the handbrake off. And that showed from Blackpool, Charlton, Lincoln. It was literally, all said the handbrakes come off somewhere, and we couldn't quite pinpoint how or why. And now we know where it all came from.
A beautiful idea.
You just don't see it, do you? And like, maybe I'm showing my age now, but I was like, oh my God, they've got home footage of these players. Only realizing that they're in like mid to late 20s. Of course, there's going to be footage of them knocking around like an old Nokia or camcorder. But the way that came about, I mean, what's been the reaction to from everybody regarding that? I mean, did you have any? You must have had some great feedback from the players as well, because that really is. It's almost like just a snapshot of their lives and what they've all aspired to become. Really, it's not something that we're used to seeing, I guess.
Yeah, the feedback I've had personally has been quite overwhelmingly positive in terms of that sequence. And one of our editors, Mike Oliver, put that together, picked that tune for the beginning of it, and really went for it and owned it. And it was a discussion that we'd been having with Rob from the beginning, in terms of knowing that speech was in existence and we had coverage of it, knowing that match was coming up, and trying to see if we could fashion them together and sort of let Mike muck around with it for a while and sort of see whether he could figure something out, and came back with the beginnings of it coming together. And it was like, yes, this is definitely going to work, because at one point we weren't quite sure whether we were going to get actual footage or just pictures, and we were lucky enough to get some footage because the guys in the UK were tracking them down. When Rob went to Vegas with the players, he was getting the players to call their parents to get them to get into the attic to get the videos down, all that kind of good stuff. Like, there was a lot of people went to a lot of effort to be able to try and put that together, but it was definitely something that I certainly have got a lot of positive feedback for sure. So yeah, it's a good one.
I take it there was no found footage of James McClean breaking somebody in half as a 12-year-old, as Rob wished
I
for.
wish. It's got to exist somewhere, but we didn't manage to find it.
Interesting that Rob was asking in Vegas for it. Is it an idea you'd had for a while?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, for sure. It was that idea sort of came together because we knew that speech existed and it was something that we wanted to try and go for. So can't even remember the dates when the guys were in Vegas, but it was definitely in the process of when that was happening and when we were starting to put that episode together. So yeah, it's been around for a while. The Disney FC episode has been an idea that Rob and George Dewey have had for a while as well, in terms of trying to, they watched our original cut of episode 3 and were like, cool, we can make this work, kind of thing. So there's definitely some ideas that everybody individually has, and we kind of come together, and later on down the line we'll sometimes find an episode where it's like, okay, this is going to work here, and that Charlton match and that speech was definitely one of them, where it was a pretty early idea about what we wanted to try and achieve.
And I'll say, I mean, when we saw this is something where we've seen this so many times. We've done a few screenings of it, watching it with a theater almost full of people. And so there are moments, you know, like Foster's save against Knott's, where you get chills. It doesn't matter how many times you see it. And there are moments that provide you emotional reactions. And I don't know if it's because, like you were saying, we were all these kids. And if you weren't that kid and you're a parent, you have kids who you've seen playing, you were out rooting on a Saturday or Sunday. And so there's just something that's so common to it. And it every time I get emotional, and it just rings so true to my core. And I think that's what we just nailed this. I say we as a collective. And Andy knows this. I've been in other circumstances where sometimes we live in this echo chamber and we don't hear feedback on it. So I'll be looking at Andy and I'll be saying, like, this is good, right? It's good. And it feels good. But just to hear anyone else say, like, that was really good, and I had these same reactions to it, is really fulfilling. Like, this is something we're all so proud of, because it just lands and it just hits. And if you have no reaction to it, then you're just cold and dead and such a cynic. Because you see these kids and the joy, like the message of playing with joy, and it does take you back to, that's how we all got into this in the beginning. Our parents didn't force us to go out and play. We saw a ball, we kicked it, and there was something enriching about that. And like he says, you're playing with your friends or your family. And it's when nothing else matters, is just enjoying life. And it starts at such a young age, and it carries through, and life gets more serious, but you can still have those moments of joy. Even if you go out and you play now, it doesn't matter what it is, if you're playing Frisbee or if you're playing football. But this is just, again, something that's universal to the human condition, whatever that hobby is that brings you that enrichment. And it's just so pure. And the way that, again, things worked out for us on the field is, you couldn't make that stuff up. The stuff with, oh my gosh, who was it, Max?
The Max stuff is so good.
Like that someone found that, right? If we didn't find it, then we're not missing it. But if it's not in there now, I miss it so much.
I'm convinced that footage is less than 12 months old. He hasn't aged a day. Ridiculous.
Yeah. I think you said it perfectly, Tim, though, in terms of the fact that everybody grew up wanting to play for their club, right? And so I've still got the trophy from when I was playing for Southwood and Ferries in Essex when I was in the late 80s, and I'm sure you've got trophies from when you were playing for your club, or like little medals or what have you. Do you know what I mean? Everyone aspires to want to play or like do whatever they dream of wanting to try and do, and they've still got little tokens of it and nuggets of it. It's like that Jack Marriott thing. Everyone's like got a bit of anxiety in them, so you can relate to it. You've got everybody wanting to kind of like get their little thing that they're passionate about when they're a kid, so they can maybe try and do it when they're an adult or somewhere in that ether or somewhere in that world, you know. So it's kind of, everyone's going to sort of want to relate to that. That's why when we saw that speech with Rob, it was like, fuck me, this is amazing. This is definitely going to work. Like, we've got something here that's really, really gold.
And you go back to that footage, there's stuff that's so granular. You look at Sam Smith as a toddler, and he's kicking the ball with his left foot, like towing it, just like he scored that goal. Like, you could see the seeds of it 20-something years before.
Yeah.
Sure.
No, fantastic. Just a brilliant way to finish it. Now, I'm obviously aware of time, and we've had you guys on for a while, and we've absolutely loved every minute of it. But we finished with a quick fire. I'm going to slightly change the quick fire questions a little
Andy,
bit.
these suck, man. This is really hard.
Okay, that's more or less why I'm going to change them a little bit. Okay, so Andy, Jeff, which is your
Is there a timer?
Sorry? Well,
Is there a timer?
Yeah, well, there shouldn't be because I ballsed that up. Which is your favorite episode this season?
8.
Oh, 8. Hands down. Yeah.
In a few words, what's the plan for next season? Where else can it go? God, that's not quick fire, is it? But I think people do want to know.
I think that from the get-go, I think we need to touch base on the Mullin of it all. I hope we managed to do that. I hope we're going to open to us doing that. I think that's one thing that we're all keen on, trying to just sort of see what's happening there and keep. Mullin's one of our biggest main kind of people and characters, you know, that we all love, the club loves, the community loves. So we want to try and keep that going. So that's something that I want to see. I'm personally excited about Wrexham being 150% the massive underdogs. I think we tried to signify that a little bit with League One, but certainly going to the Championship, first match against Southampton and all that kind of shit. It's like fucking A, like this is definitely underdog now, you know. So I think that's a big thing.
Yeah, underdog story again.
Yeah, my thing is new players. Who's going to be out there? How do they fit into actually the success on the pitch? But how do they fit into the dock? Because we talked about, you know, people who are more media trained, and how do we have access to them? And these people running the club have so much pressure on them now. Here we are again, back to a 3-sided pitch, right? So what are we going to have? 10,600 in the Championship seems like a challenge. And we're the only club that's never been top level out of all these other. We were looking at the fixture the other day. It is crazy. You look at the teams that we're going up against, like what's going to happen. And is our story, you know, our story is always interesting from a standpoint of we've always been fighting for promotion from episode 1 back in season 1. And that's always been the arc. And so is that going to be the arc season 5? That's pretty optimistic. Are we mid-table? I would even say that's pretty optimistic. And for us as storytellers, how compelling is a club that's mid-table if we're just sort of hovering, right? Are we close to relegation? That's a story we haven't told. And it's pretty scary. And there's casualties that come with that. Yeah. So,
gosh, Debbie Downer, Jeff. Fucking A. We're still going to be going to promotion, right, guys?
I'm just saying maybe. I want Andy to go.
Also,
Andy's right. We will plateau at some point, and that's
for sure.
And that's where we have to see how does the documentary reflect that? And to be honest, you know, you've just got to ask: is a couple of seasons in mid-table something that people would want to watch? I don't know. I mean, you've got to ask those questions.
You do.
The other questions I want to ask is for the longtime fans, what sort of access do people have? I mean, these are the realities to 10,600 tickets for a championship match. Yeah. How is the town doing? How is the town managing this growth, this meteoric growth of the club? And how is the town sort of hanging on and going along for the ride there?
Yeah.
I also want to see the women's team coming back and smash it this next season.
Yeah.
That would be good.
Yeah. Right. Very last one from me. Did you guys ever think that this series would be so big?
Never.
I didn't.
I mean, I came in season 1. I was just thrilled to get a season 2. And it just keeps going and giving us these gifts, knock on wood. Archie's health, Maurice's health, promotion. Like, you couldn't make this up. If you walked, I say this all the time, if you walked into an executive's office and you said, hey, here's what's going to happen, they'd say, get out of here. That's so derivative. Do something original. What's next? You know, like Rob says, why not dream big? Why not this team? Why not this town?
Yeah.
Are
That's
there,
it for me.
are there any
Tim,
market?
yeah.
Are there any markets that the documentary hasn't opened up to yet? Because I think a lot's been mentioned of kind of the lucrative Far East market, and from a sort of football business standpoint. I mean, we know obviously North America, then Australia in terms of the growth, in terms of viewership for the doc. Where after that? Are we any closer to sort of identifying other countries that are maybe significantly further behind Australia, but are slowly growing, and thinking maybe that's another place to explore other avenues?
I think that's up to that goes all the way back to Disney Plus
Hmm.
and how they would want to promote and do that outreach. I mean, clearly we've made a mark in the English speaking markets.
Yeah.
I don't know how you get into or as impactful in other markets that already have very established leagues that they follow.
Hmm.
You know, and I think it's sort of like from a Disney Plus thing, what's the return on your investment for
Yeah.
something like that?
Cool. Chaps, absolutely loved that. Thank you so much for your time. Andy, thank you for sharing some of your holiday with us. It looks absolutely wonderful out there in South Wales. So
Yeah, glad
yeah,
you came.
just
I
want to
feel like
say,
this is-
like, on behalf of Andy, myself, and Liam and Reese, thank you for involving us in this process, because you know, not just saying that as fanboys, but it's genuinely a privilege and a pleasure to be involved in some small part or another, and to be able to help tell this story in a you know, very, very straightforward, genuine way is something that we don't take for granted. So it's nice to see that, and look back on in 20-30 years time and go, oh yeah, remember when we said that? Remember when Andy said he hated that monologue and all these little bits? So yeah, thank you for that.
and we owe you guys a thanks. I would be remiss if I didn't say that I think this was your guys' best season so far. So
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's an honor to be on an award-winning podcast with you guys.
Oh, well, you say
there
that
somewhere.
for all the Wrexham podcasts.
Yeah, no, I'd echo that from Jeff too. It's been a privilege working with you guys, and also just been a privilege listening to you guys, listening to Rob Ryan Red, jumping on Red Passion every now and again when I'm keeping a finger on the pulse, really. So it's been invaluable. So appreciate you guys too.
Cheers.
For sure.
And Jeff, special shout out to your dog who made a special appearance.
thanks,
Yes.
appreciate that. Sorry, she barked for a minute there.
That's fine. That's absolutely fine. Thanks very much, guys.
All right, take it
Appreciate
easy.
Cheers.